right, we're on.
We're on.
Yeah, man, this was good. So I know we're just kind of kicking off and riffing, and
Yep.
you were making the point of, when we have extremes of adherence to either, like wanting to help those that need help to an extreme, like you run the risk of a welfare state, and you don't reward those that pull themselves up by their bootstraps and actually contribute and drive society forward and improve humanity for everyone. And that, there's some correlation between conservatives and liberals on either spectrum of those ideologies. And so, like, too much welfare state, like you were saying, goes to communism. Too much of a free market and like no rules in place, then you run the risk of the elites and those that have not distributing and sharing with the have-nots.
Right.
Right?
Essentially an oligarchy, right? Where it's just such a vast divide between, like you said, the haves and the haves not have nots. It doesn't create a good society for most people.
And it takes real vision and, I think, trust in a leader that would implement a structure that has equitable wealth distribution. The first person that comes to mind is FDR and the New Deal that created, I guess, this flourishing middle class in America and manufacturing. That you had, I guess, macroeconomic events that helped to, bring the economic opportunity forward, but the economic opportunity was capitalized in a way that created upward mobility, a strong middle class, and I think a really healthy wealth distribution. And it's hard to argue that we haven't adhered to those values as we've come out of, the Industrial Revolution, really. And as we've look at what happened with Silicon Valley and the wealth that was created from the dot-com booms, the financial crisis within Wall Street, and now arguably we're going into another boom of AI-driven innovations and monetizing AI. And you're left wondering, like, are we set up for success of creating a healthy, wealth distribution, or are we going to get even more polarized and flatten the bell curve even more and just have the haves and the have-nots? And I don't know, we seem to be teetering right on that, right on that scale. Like, not, I don't see anybody that has a plan for equitable wealth distribution for our generation.
Yeah. I mean, I think the closest that I've seen was UBI, right? With Andrew Yang when he was running for president, where you have universal basic income. You provide everyone with the bare minimum of their needs, right? In terms of housing, food, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't limit you from striving for more, where you can, it's not communism where you get what you get and you're done, right? It's, you can strive for more. Your basic needs are met. So you're not worried about surviving, but then it frees up your time because you're not just earning for the basic, your most basic of needs, but you're free to devote your time, whether it be to art, to music, or if you choose to make more money. No one's stopping you from doing that. And I think that is an interesting concept. I don't know how it would work in reality. I don't know if logistically that would work, because that is a lot of payments being dispersed by the government. So I don't know if that would work, but it's an interesting concept.
No question. It is a fascinating concept, and you don't know whether he's a little bit ahead of his time. And, I mean, I feel like there's only, I mean, there's some predictability in what the future will hold in terms of extremes of the impact of AI on our jobs and our future. And, like, the one extreme is AI is going to replace all of us, and like HAL and whatever 2001 Space Odyssey. And then you've got the other view of it being like the Jetsons, and we'll just live side by side and they'll allow us to operate at a more, optimal level and take care of rote mundane tasks that we don't really want to do anyway, and help us to be happier. And likely it'll be something in between, right? It's the way
Yeah.
that I would imagine it. But I say all that because if we get to a more and more of an extreme where we don't have a skilled labor force in our country that can fill the jobs that we need to create the uh, you know corporations, the jobs, the standard of living that would jobs that would allow people to have a standard of living that is you know manageable, or like, I guess, somewhat fulfilling, with a path to upward mobility that seems attainable. And I think that's the key, right? You want a path to upward mobility that's attainable. That, yeah, if I would choose to work two jobs and bust it, that I'm going to be rewarded and compensated for that, versus some corporate douchebag sitting at home working on their laptop all day and not really working that hard, but crushing it. And yeah, I don't know, man. I struggle with it. I don't know the answer to which way, what is right, like what should be right. I don't know. I don't know. Struggle.
I don't think there's a clear answer because if you look at the long arc of human history, right, you could argue we're better off now than we ever have been in
Right.
modern society, but things could get better, right? So I think we should keep striving for that. But yeah, but who's to say? We don't know because I don't think there's a unique set of challenges with each new technology, right? And so no one has the answer because we're all just kind of figuring it out as we go. And yeah, I don't know that it's all. I think that's why democracy is messy, right? Because it's all trial and error. You kind of try things out, they don't work, and that's why it tends to be cyclical, also, where the government goes from left to right and back again, and it just keeps doing that because when the people are in power, they tend to get blamed for what goes wrong and probably don't get enough credit for what goes right, and then you end up with the other party in power, and then back and forth it goes, right? And but I'm hopeful that with each iteration of that, of going back and forth, that we make progress with each of those iterations, right? Maybe sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back, but over the long term, I think if you look at American history and the history of democracy in general, which to be honest isn't that long, right? I think anyone would agree that we've made progress, and I think progress is good. And I think it was Barack Obama during his first or second term, I can't remember. It's a famous anecdote that they would get hammered. Obviously, they would get hammered by the right, but they would also get hammered by the left because Obama was considered very centrist. Um, and even with his team, like he would have to push back against being too far one way or the other, and he would just say progress is progress, like progress is good, that it doesn't have to be perfect, you don't have to appease everyone, but incremental progress is good. I think that's some hope that I can hold, and hopefully that we all can.
So let's use the, I guess, example of his, I guess, signature legislation in the Affordable Care Act, and what we're calling Obamacare. And I think that example validates the point that you just made, where it was definitely not a perfect piece of legislation,
Yeah.
but it was definitely progress addressing one problem in our society of just the number of uninsured patients that we have.
Mhm.
And, we've tried social safety nets of Medicaid, which certainly address healthcare coverage for a certain percentage of our population that have, you know, I don't know what it is, now, but like, a couple 100% above the federal poverty line. And, you can qualify for Medicaid. But then from there, you had no programs to really help the next group of people that make too much above the federal poverty line, and, have a job that doesn't provide them health care, and they still don't make enough to be able to necessarily afford something in the open market until Obamacare. And now, you had an open market that allowed individuals seeking care to get the collective benefits and scale of programs across a large bolus of individual people that are seeking care. So they got the benefits of, let's say, an employee plan and negotiating against the payer as an individual, which addressed a problem for tens of millions of people in America. Like, that's still progress to your point. Like, I
Right.
don't know what it was, like 20 million people, something like that, eventually started getting 20 to 25 million, eventually now have coverage through the Affordable Care Act program. And that's a huge benefit to our society. That's, 10 to 15% of our society that was not insured, that was burdening taxpayers in general, that now have a better path and are not burdening our healthcare system as much. So is it perfect? No. Is it progress? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even, I mean, yeah, that's a huge accomplishment in and of itself. But I think the other thing that the Affordable Care Act did was shift the Overton window, right, of what is acceptable and what people want and expect from the government. And it is not an extreme of everything single payer, and it's not the other extreme of, total free market, where the insurance companies have free reign. It's somewhere in the middle. And yeah, like you said, it's not perfect, but it shifted that Overton window so that the conversation now is in that realm where it's, yeah, we should expect people to have healthcare in this country.
So let's connect that with your earlier point of universal basic income. And I think there's a lot of overlap and correlation in the benefits of both and the impact to society that it could have. Because one of my arguments has been, when I think of the risk involved in entrepreneurship, my own personal situation, others that I see around me, one of the biggest factors that go into making a decision of, should I go and, work for a corporation, or should I go and try to make it on my own, depending on your life situation. If you have a family and you have children and you're the sole, breadwinner for the family, healthcare costs and healthcare expenses and coverage weigh very heavily on your decision to pursue entrepreneurship or not, which I think then stymies innovation and holds back the creation of new solutions that drive better lives for everyone around us. And maybe, again, same thing, eventually you get there, but if you have more people feeling confident in entrepreneurship, the talent pool rises in that part of the market, and you've got more checks and balances on stodgy corporations who can't work as quick. Excuse me.
But
Damn, could not get the mute button fast enough on that. And so I think it would unlock a large economic boom to our to our society, to our economy, if we addressed and made people feel confident they have affordable healthcare. I think it would be as good as universal basic income, is my point, Shaq.
yeah. So that's interesting. So let's say with the Affordable Care Act, or if we're talking about universal basic income, your basic needs are covered, and then you're free to then go and pursue your passions or a business or whatever it is. So yeah, I would say that that does, and I think I just remembered what I was thinking about. So I've talked a lot about in the past couple episodes about that book, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about how kind of groups evolved, right? And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was the one of the differences between liberals and conservatives is not necessarily the morality of taking care of other people, but it's the scale. I think with conservatives, it tends to be smaller groups. There is the care foundational, morality. It's there, but it's around smaller groups. It's about your family. It's about your small community. It's about your church. It's about much smaller groups. For liberals, it tends to be much larger. It's about society in general, and that can be somewhat abstract, right? Especially if you're not hardwired. And he argues this is all hardwired into us by genetics and how we're raised and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not hardwired for that, then that could seem very foreign to you. Like, why would I care about the whole country when I care about my family, I care about my group, my community, I care about these small groups that I'm affiliated with. And there's an argument to be made that evolutionarily speaking, that is how we came about, right? We weren't designed, or we weren't built to care about someone who lived across the country or who knows where, right? We evolved to care about our immediate group of people. I forget what the number is, but I think it's something like 20 or 30 people. That's what we kind of that's what we should care about because that's just how we came about. So
Yeah.
that is interesting. I think that's the primary difference I see, right? Where I think that's why conservatives react so negatively to large government initiatives, especially federal, because they don't see it as moral, whereas liberals do. And I think that's I think that's a really key difference, right? And it's not that one side is right and one side is wrong. It's a matter of scale. And I think when we're talking about universal basic income, I think that's why I think a lot of conservatives would react negatively to it is because it's helping a large group of people and it just doesn't compute for them. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just doesn't compute for them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, it's a valid, the perspective makes sense to me because if you're looking at an individual who's feeling that they are working as hard as they can, they're maybe working 60, 70 hours a week, trying to take care of their kids. They see the cost of everything around them going up, and they're living on the teetering edge of feeling that, hey, one false step here, one, bad medical diagnosis there, and my whole what I've achieved can all come crumbling down like a house of cards. And I'm trying to figure out how to keep my life afloat. And I don't really give a shit about what pronouns a person wants to use. Like I'm
Yeah,
worrying
exactly right.
about my life and my economic situation. And to your point, like, dude, a broader issue about pronouns is not important to me right now. Like, let's
Right.
use that energy to figure out how I can be a little bit more comfortable in my life and not feel like I'm gonna lose and have to sell my house and downgrade and be home, like whatever, right? Like you're just feeling like that's not the area of society that I need to focus on right now. I need to focus on the economic, you know, improvement of the world around me and my peers too. I mean, I think
Yep.
they view that as a more noble cause to solve for. And I don't think it's meant maliciously, but it's like, hey, dude, we can only focus on solving so many problems. Let's solve this, right? Like it's an interesting analogy to like nationalistic view versus a global view. Like it
Hmm.
really is because
Yeah.
it's a very parallel argument to say, all right, well, like, why are we subsidizing wars in the rest of the world when we can use all that money to just help America? Like improve our lives, invest in America, invest in our country, put up the four walls, forget about the chaos that's happening in the rest of the world. Let's just worry about getting ours. But then you kind of have the similar issue where like, guys, it's short-sighted.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
short-sighted because if we really go that way, the whole world will, crumble around us, and eventually we're going to get swallowed up. And so you kind of have to balance, like, all
Yeah.
right, we can't go all the way nationalistic, and you can't go all the way focusing just about economic stuff without focusing on some social issues like pronouns and genders. But like we can we can have all conversations.
Right.
We can still
Absolutely.
talk about all of
Yeah.
that and have an open dialogue and say, dude, let's figure this out. And then I'll focus a little bit more on this shit. But let's focus on this one first. This is more important right
Right.
now.
Right. And I think you saw that, right? And you're right. It's all about balance. You saw the shift on the left in this election cycle from defund the police and open borders to a lot more hardline, right? A lot more to the middle, where it's like, no, we maybe it's a good idea. We should have borders because we should know who's in our country. Yeah, we you can handle it in a compassionate way. You don't have to separate kids from their parents, right? But maybe there shouldn't be free reign for people coming into the country illegally, right? And I
Yep.
think that's fair. I don't think that's a hard line right wing view to have personally, but I also think you have to handle it compassionately, right? Like obviously there's a reason people want to come into this country and there are a lot of different reasons, right? Because of political turmoil in other countries, because they're being driven out due to economic or social or political reasons. So I think you have to be sensitive to that. But yeah, I don't think we should have open borders, right? So yeah, you saw the shift a little bit. And let me talk a little bit about defund the police, just because I had this conversation recently. Because I don't think the left did themselves any favors with that slogan. Because I know what the meaning behind it was. It wasn't take money away from the police. It was, the police are doing all these different things. They're not just policing. They're doing social work. They're doing all these other things that they shouldn't be doing. So let's take some of that money and invest it in social workers and other people who can do that work, and let the police focus on policing. So that, I think that was the message behind it. But defund the police is just a horrible, horrible marketing message, and they got hammered on that.
Yeah, no question. No question. And when I think of other examples like what you brought up related to how, like, our democracy, I mean, talk about it in action in our lifetime. I'll give you the example for you and I of social policy on gun control. I mean, I remember growing up, like, I just never understood Americans' fascination with guns.
Yeah.
Never understood it. Never got it. I'm like, why the hell do we need these guns? Like, it's so stupid. Like, just get rid of all of them. And I was definitely in that camp of like not understanding why the hell we need so many guns. And now, as I've gotten older, like, all right, I get it. Like, I understand. You and I went out, we shot some guns, and we fired some fun, awesome, like military grade weapons and sniper rifles. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is fun as hell. Like, this
Yeah.
was really entertaining. It was like an amazingly, enjoyable experience to go out and shoot some guns. And I'm like, all right, like I could get why if I have a group of people that are trying to take away and, something that I enjoy, like I would be upset at them. Like I'd be like, screw you. Like you don't like you can't don't take my guns away. But at the same time, how do we ensure that if one side is progressing, that we get the other side to progress also and have common sense, middle of the road policy like what democracy, preaches and ultimately delivers. It's just a matter of how long it takes, I think, and how much each side is willing to compromise. Because I would argue the vast majority of people say there's no need for military grade weapons in our society. We don't need automatic
Yeah.
rifles. Like, are they fun to shoot at a driving range? Sure. But maybe that's the only place they should be for the average citizen that's not in the military. Like, we just don't need it. It's fun. It's great. But like, dude, if you need to have a military grade weapon because you think the government is coming for you, like, you got bigger problems that you need to worry about.
Yeah.
That's the way I look
Absolutely.
at it. Like,
Yeah.
focus on like same thing. Like, okay, you don't like the pronouns, like, then you shouldn't be worrying about you needing to have 85, AR-15s to protect against some government invasion of your home. Like,
Right.
come on.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up gun control, because a few years ago I had an interesting kind of mentality shift about it. And it was when I don't remember what the conversation was, but I do remember the shift that I had. So, and it's all about personal rights, right? So there's the saying, it's better to let 100 guilty men go free than put one innocent man in prison, right? And it's better to have an imperfect system where you let these people go free who are guilty of crimes than to take away the civil rights of someone unjustly, right? And I realized that that's the argument on the gun control, or the not gun control side, the other side,
Hmm.
is that they see it as a personal right, like a civil right. And when you bring up school shootings or you bring up any other kind of mass violence with guns, if you look at it from that lens, then I think you could start understanding that the argument is, because if you see it as a personal civil right that's inalienable, just like your right to liberty, right, where you shouldn't be imprisoned unjustly. If you see the right to own a gun as the same as that, as equal to that, and you may not, but if you do, then you'll see that all the violence that guns cause, it doesn't matter, because it's your right and you can't take that away from me. Does that make sense?
It does. Your point is there's an unintended consequence of you overregulating guns. And the
Mhm.
unintended consequence could be a compromise on your civil liberties because court systems may be more conservative in the whole, like, innocent until proven guilty approach that we take, where you may be leaning a little bit more on increasing your guilty convictions because you're afraid that there isn't going to be some level of self-regulation of these criminals out in the real world.
Right.
Because if you've got some dude with a gun in the house, you're going to think twice about invading that person's house. Versus if you live in a society where the risk of you invading a person's house is like 5 to 10% of Americans own guns, like, I'll take my chances, right? Like, I know this
Hmm.
family, they're liberal, they're not going to own guns. Like, screw it, I'm going to take my chances with this house. And so, yeah, then you do have a little bit, you know, of a there's not as much intimidation for criminality, I think is what you're saying. Whereas, like, if you have guns that Americans can own guns, and there is a bias towards, hey, you know what? Like, there isn't enough here to convict this person. Yeah, they probably did it, but like, I don't know for sure. I'm going to let them go out in the real world. And let's say they continue to,
Uh,
participate in criminal activity. Maybe some dude will take care of it themselves. I don't know. I don't know.
that's interesting. I wasn't even thinking that you kind of took it to another level. You're connecting the two. I was more thinking of it as, the civil right to liberty and the civil right to owning firearms. If you see them as equal, the kind of collateral damage that comes from that on one side is, guilty men going free, is the same as people being killed in mass shootings, because in an imperfect system, you can't control that collateral damage without taking away your personal rights. So that's more what I was thinking. But it's interesting that you connected the two.
Yeah. I mean, that's a phenomenal moral question. The, consequence of our policy of, right, like, very liberal gun controls or almost none, that you get mass shootings, and you're willing to use that, or excuse me, accept that risk. And I mean, not even risk, like, it's freaking happening, because you don't want to restrict an individual's right to own a gun. Is that worth it? Is that worth it? Is that civil liberty
Right.
that important to you that you're willing to risk a couple of mass shootings a year, a couple of
Right.
shootings at schools? And so then it's like, all right, so can we be smarter? Like, this is the part that drives me insane about where we are, because it's like the whole freaking point of democracy is you put common sense shit into place to have your cake and eat it too.
Hmm.
But we've, like, lost common sense. So, okay, maybe we all agree that, okay, we're not going to take guns. Like, liberals have come around, freaking Kamala Harris as vice president candidate, and even like the liberal nominees were not taking guns away. That was not on the platform in this election. So why can't we get a little bit of compromise from the conservatives that say, but you know what? Like, school shootings really do suck, and we should do something to prevent school shootings. That isn't taking our guns away, but is practical common sense of, like, dude, you're a parent and you let your kid get a hold of a military grade weapon and go shoot up a school, get the fuck to jail. Like, you're
Right.
out. Like, you screwed up. You didn't put the right protections in place to make sure your kid can't access a gun. Like, you should go to jail.
Yeah. I
We
mean,
put
talking about
parents,
personal responsibility, right?
listen, how can you not get behind that? I want to
Yep.
hear the counter argument to that, right? Like,
Right.
like, you can't have it both ways if you're saying you want personal accountability. And then when things go sideways, you're saying, well, that's all right. That's my 14-year-old kid. Like, like, what happens? Like, I want to make sure he can get access to a gun if somebody comes into my house and I'm not able to get to it. Like, does he need a military grade weapon then? I think a handgun will work just fine for somebody trying to rob
Right.
your house.
Yep. And then you have to deal with, if you want to have that right, then you have to deal with the consequences if things go wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't square up how we don't have as many obstacles in place for uh, an American citizen to get a gun than we do for cigarettes,
Mhm.
marijuana, alcohol. Like, look at all the protections we've put into place on drinking and driving, and making
Right.
sure that we're reducing, vehicular homicide, and, like, due to negligence by, citizens in our country. Like, I mean, this is embarrassing as a country where we are with gun violence in our country. It's
Yep.
bad. It's
That's true.
embarrassing. So, like, we have it within our control to fix it. God, why can't we fix it?
I don't know, man. I don't think we have the political will for it. At this moment, it just feels like we're so broken politically,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we talk about this all the time where it's just we're so divided and we're so unwilling to talk to each other that it just seems like nothing will get done. I'm hopeful that it'll come back, right? Where it's well, even this is cyclical, where the country gets divided. I think I sent a quote the other day to you guys. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up real quick, just because I thought it was really interesting. Simply for historical context, that I think we've been in similar situations before. Like it's not unprecedented.
No question.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
And while you pull that up, I'll plug another book um, that I think I've plugged on the show before, and that's the storm before the calm,
Mm,
um, by Friedman. I think Walter Friedman or something like that. And yeah, I mean, he preaches these cycles, right? These 40, 50 year, your
yeah,
cycles, and that, whoever this presidency is, whether it was, we know it's going to be Trump now, but whether it was Kamala or Trump, his point of view was it's going to be, just a very difficult presidency. It's going to be a very
right.
difficult economic turmoil, difficult economic situations, and that the next great leader that's going to take us on our next phase of democracy will emerge in the 2028 elections.
Mm,
That
interesting.
leader is in the political system now and doesn't know whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, a conservative or a
Yeah,
liberal, but that this next cycle of our democracy is going to start in the next election. He's talking about something like, like he was saying Reagan was the start of like Reaganomics and
hmm,
trickle down economics and all the kind of evolution that happened with Reagan. Before that
yeah,
was FDR, that type of like a visionary, basically, that's going to put a new, like, substantial policy in place that, you know, we can build our next cycle off of and fix the brokenness of our lack of compromising. But anyway,
yeah.
yeah.
No, that's really. I know you keep recommending it, but it's on my list. I think it's next after I finish the one I'm reading now. But
Yeah.
speaking of which, so we're talking about things being cyclical, and this one really stuck out to me. I'm reading Nexus by Noah Harari, and he talks about the first State of the Union that John Adams gave in 1825, and I'll just read this passage because I think it's worth repeating here. It goes, Southerners feared that a federal government that claims the power to build a lighthouse of the skies in their backyard may one day claim the power to free their slaves too. Adams was accused of harboring dictatorial ambitions, while the erudition and sophistication of his speech were criticized as elitist and disconnected from ordinary Americans. The public debates over the 1825 message to Congress dealt a severe blow to the reputation of the Adams administration and helped pave the way to Adams' electoral defeat. In the 1828 presidential elections, Adams lost to Andrew Jackson, a rich slave-holding planter from Tennessee, who was successfully rebranded in numerous newspaper columns as the man of the people, and who claimed that the previous elections were in fact stolen by Adams and by the corrupt Washington elites. Hell, you can replace a couple of names in there, and we could be talking about right now.
Yeah,
It's
no
isn't it
question.
interesting? Isn't it interesting that it's a good reminder that we've been in these situations before. Like no political situation is unprecedented, even though it might feel like it in the present moment. I'd argue that it's because it is in the present moment and because it's accelerated by social media and by the 24-hour news cycle that it feels so unprecedented that I think it's important to look at historical context to bring it down. I think just looking at the historical context brings the conversation down a notch. It doesn't have to be so extreme. Like, the other side aren't the Nazis. You know, we've been in these situations before. Let's take the tone and temper of our conversations down a notch and let's just talk.
Yeah. Well said, man. Well said. It's so true. And I think the other element that I would add to your list would be give a little, give people benefit of the doubt,
Yep.
like, Everybody has to give a little in a frickin' compromise. Like that's how this works, guys. Everybody doesn't get everything. So just as we were talking about the Affordable Care Act, progress is progress, and progress requires compromise. And compromise is not weakness. Compromise is progress. Compromise is love, right? Like it's saying that I hear you, but be careful of going so far with what you're trying to do. And let's go there a little slower. And when we've rushed to one extreme, it's always been a suboptimal outcome. It always has. I
Yep.
mean, I can, and you can even go through the examples in our head, like, the one very related to me is healthcare. Like you just go right away and you say, all right, we're going to go single payer. The economic impact of just going to a single payer without thinking that through to our country would be devastating.
Yep.
So you can't just kind of react without being thoughtful, and let's follow our democratic process. Let's be willing to compromise. And to your point, let's have open dialogue, because it is through these open dialogues of our political leaders that we get the best outcome.
Yeah.
Let's get the extremes on both sides to just shut the hell up, and let's get the moderates to start taking over and getting us some good ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you were talking about before about the book that you're reading, the Storm Before the Calm. Thinking through that, like I don't honestly, I think our at this point our political proclivities are pretty clear, but I honestly don't even care who that person is. If it's truly someone who's going to unite us and maybe pull a little bit from the left and a little bit from the right, and you know have an actual plan, and it's not just about tearing down the other side, then hell, I make him a Republican. I don't really give a shit. Like just move forward, and I'll happily vote for this person. But we do have to, we have to. You're right. We have to compromise, and we have to find a way to move forward.
No question. And we have to get back to decency and honesty, right? Like I get the reaction that says like, hey, at all costs, we need to force a certain decision because we're not feeling heard. Like, let's just go. And maybe both sides are guilty of this. Like not being a little bit introspective and saying, is this really what I believe? Like, is this the best that I want to get behind? And I find very few people that think that either candidate in this election was the best option. That what people were, I mean, there
Yeah,
were, of course, everybody has their sides and you have your beliefs, but I would argue that we all could do with better choices, both parties. I think we both want better choices. And I think to your point, like, if the only way that we're going to get better choices is for us to relax our biases for the R or the D and really focus on who's got the best ideas and the best policies. Forget about the bravado and the messaging and the media's, creation and stirring up of drama. Like, let's really focus on policy. Let's really focus on what is the policy that we want to get behind and what are the top issues for us that we want to debate in an open dialogue. And to me, the way that happens, buddy, the way that we fix our democracy and where my optimism comes from every day is to get local. Get
yeah,
involved in your local town's politics and forget about the national media broadcasts and forget about even Twitter and Facebook and Insta. Like, it doesn't impact your life. Just get local, get involved in your local town politics, and talk to your neighbors. Doesn't matter, liberal, conservatives, talk to them. You
yeah,
will be enlightened by your conversation because, like we talk about all the time, we have way more in common than different, way more.
yeah. So true. And as you said that, I was thinking the same thing. I think we need to get away from media narratives, but even more than that, I think the media narratives develop because I think the root, at least this is what I think. I think one of the root causes of our division is this two-party system that we have. And I
Mm,
think with our current electoral process, there's just no getting away from it, right? It's going to continue being two sides, and each side gets entrenched, and then the media, it just divides itself, right? There's a left media, there's a right media. There's no like neutral media anymore, not
yep.
really. So let's keep one thing. I mean, I wouldn't have a call to action or anything prep for this episode, but I'd like to suggest one, which is let's keep in the back of our mind that maybe we should and we can in some way over the long term fix our electoral system. And, whether that's ranked choice voting that allows third parties to have a real shot rather than just rather than just playing spoiler. And it's just about the two parties. I think I'm sure there's a lot of proposals that have been put forward and start local, like let's see if we can make this happen. And it's gonna be a long, hard road, I'm sure, but that's something I feel like I can get passionate about and really behind, which is just well, let's just get away from this two party system because I don't think in the long term it's good for anything, right? I think the more voices we have in the political arena, the better off we're going to be in the long term.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. The only other piggyback to that, to the power of ranked choice voting, and again, this is, probably a bit more on a macro level, but eventually I think we'll get there, is getting, campaign finance reform done.
Oh yeah,
Getting
100%.
PACs out and, getting, reducing the impact of corporations being able to buy their candidates. And, but I would rank that second to your point. I think ranked choice voting would do tremendous amount to benefit our society, to get better candidates, to get better ideas, and it would remove this like complacency with our candidates, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a great point. I think that those two kind of go hand in hand, right? Because it's all about the campaign finance and elections go hand in hand. And I mean, look at all the money that was involved in this campaign alone,
God.
right? Billions, and it's just too much money. I mean, it's just a corrupt system, and we have to get away from it. But it's going to have to come from the people. It's going to have to be ground up,
Yeah.
pushing for this kind of. And maybe we start with the local elections. Maybe we um, you know, to your town council or your school
Yep.
board or whatever, like, let's see if we can push that locally and, maybe it'll work its way up.
I couldn't agree more, man. I'm all for it. Still gets me excited. That part
Yeah.
really gets me excited. And, maybe a teaser. I mean, we've talked about this last point that that I'll make here too, but like the more I've socialized with the diversity of people in my own neighborhood, political views, personalities, educations, all of that, the happier I felt, the more fulfilled I felt, the more connected I felt, the less lonely I felt. And like it gives me optimism. And I feel like the more I've interacted with with diverse perspectives, the more enlightened I feel. Like, goes back to the points of why it's so easy to get passionate about humanity and people, because we're amazing. There is so much joy in meeting a new person. There's so much joy in making a deep connection with another human being that like, why why wouldn't we want to do it? Like that's one of the like, having a strong foundation and a spouse that you can go through life with, and then you build that off of having friends that you can go and do life with. I mean, there's really nothing more rewarding than that. So
Yeah. So true. That is a great point. I think there's your call to action for this episode. Go talk to people, go talk to your neighbors. I feel
man.
like we do that a lot, but I think 'cause it's so important, right? It's important to talk to other people who may not share your views because that's how we learn. That's how we
Yep.
expand our viewpoints. That's how we improve the way we see the world, right? You
Yeah.
can't just be stuck in your own viewpoint all the time. You can't be in your little echo chamber. You get out
Yeah.
there.
Talk to us. Shoot us a note. Shoot us an email. Like,
Yeah.
all good, man. We'd love to interact with whoever. Be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've talked about having guests on. We're trying to get some people on, but yeah, we'd welcome anyone. So if you want to talk, shoot us a note.
All right. I think that's the pod.
All right, I think that's a pod.
All right. So we'll keep questioning everything.
Yeah, except this podcast.
All right.
See you
Till
next
next
time.
time.